the truth is right now, I would say a deal takes the same time now that it took 30 years ago. There are some things today which we can do at one click of the button, which when I started would have taken us 1 week to do, without exaggeration, but it's still not faster to do a deal overall.
Hey, hi guys. This is Bhavesh here from Tracxn, and we have Ronny Grosman here with us from Blackwood Capital. Ronny has personally got 30 years of experience in the investment banking industry, advising corporates, private equity players, and family offices on merger and acquisitions and corporate finance. Right. Some of the transactions Ronny was involved in his early career include acquisition of Wymos Lock Systems by Value, the acquisition of Beneco Calico by Continental AG, right? The sale of Winkler and Gilbler to Doughty Hanson. So, Ronny, thank you so much for being with us here.
Sure. Thank you for having us.
So, Ronny, if you can just throw some lights on your background and how did you get started in the investment banking industry?
Sure. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And yeah, I think the world was, I would say, less digital than it is now. You have to think about it as, pre-internet and all that. So I didn't know a whole lot about it before I got into it. That's the truth. So I'm originally from Germany. Frankfurt in Germany was my hometown. And Frankfurt was always, it is now, and also when I grew up there in the 70s and 80s, it was a very international place and a place where, America had a big influence. It was sort of Cold War times, and, Frankfurt was, I think, where America had a big air base. So there were always a lot of Americans in Frankfurt, with investment banking sort of being, a bit of an American, and now it's a global industry, but I would say it started in America. But even then, when I grew up in Frankfurt, I didn't know much about it. But what I did want to do was study in America. So I again, pre-digital times, I went to a library, I went to the American section, I found a book on American universities, and I called them up and asked for the application forms, and I sent them by post, and I translated my own German grades into American grades, with a pencil on the side, all very analog. And, one thing led to another, and I ended up studying economics in America in the beginning of the 90s. And when I graduated, I first went back to Europe because I wanted to be closer to my family. I went back to Frankfurt. And it was an evening, and I don't actually even remember what the topic was about, but it was in Frankfurt, and maybe a charity evening or something, where I just got dragged along. My parents dragged me along, and they said, "Look, you should come because you're thinking about what to do." I wanted to do something in finance, but I didn't know anything about sort of M&A. And at that evening, I met the then chairman of a British investment bank called Kleinwort Benson. At that time, it was called Kleinwort Benson. I met him there and, introduced myself, told him what I had studied. And he said, "Why don't you do an internship with us? And we do M&A." And I said, "Okay," and that's how it started. I went there, I did an internship, and I liked it so much. And eventually they offered me a permanent job. And then I got transferred from Frankfurt to London. And that's sort of how it started for me, really, without knowing much about it, via an internship,
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I think that's how, you end up most of the times, right? Even my career, basically, when I got started, it got started like this. Like, I met somebody in a gym, and that person was actually into the industry. He basically introduced me to the entire. He gave me an internship in his factory for 2-3 months, and that's how I got hooked into the industry, and I'm in this. right? So yeah, I think this is a pretty good journey. So Ronnie, you've spent 30 years of your life, like since
Mm,
1995, I guess, right? And you've
that's right.
seen seasons, right? You've kind of seen 30 seasons here in the M&A industry. So how was it back then, and how is it now? I mean, when you're dealing with, there's a huge shift. I'm sure you've seen, like
Yes.
a lot of changes. So if you just help us understand how was it before back then, the M&A transactions that would take place.
Yeah, I mean it's a great question, and it's funny because some things are the same, right? Because certain things don't change, and some things are completely different, right? I think interestingly, one of the biggest changes only came recently, which is also how we're talking today, right? And that's because of COVID. In the past, every little meeting that you had was physical, right? And you would fly for one meeting. And M&A is always a very international product, or has always been a very international thing. And for every meeting, you would fly somewhere just to be in front of a client, even for an hour. And obviously now, most of the meetings are online, right? Um, and we can, of course, go into very granular things of how everything has changed for the people who are working in M&A, or let's say how deals are done in general. There's sort of many different facets to it. I don't know what interests you more. Is it more interesting for you to hear from the viewpoint of people actually working in it, how the job has changed, or is it more interesting sort of about generally the product or how it's changed for clients or companies in it? What is it that interests you?
Both exactly. So I want to understand what kind of, because back then sectors were very different, industries were very different. So M&A used to happen in this very specific and niche industry, like one or two industries, I'm assuming, because there were not a whole lot of opportunities that are right now. Right, there are probably 30 years back, I think there were like handful of industries, five, six industries that we knew about. I think right now we have like at least 30 to 40 industries that we actually work with. So how was it like then, and what kind of sectors actually, you have seen evolved, and how was
Yeah,
it working in those sectors?
no, I think that's a really good question. I think it's also reflected of sort of what I've been doing, right? When I started, most of it was what we would call industrial today, or what we would
Mhm.
call, maybe disrespectfully, old economy, right?
Mhm.
But this is where most of the action was when I started. Things like steel, automotive, manufacturing, engineering. And interestingly, a lot of these companies that I used to work with when I started have, of course, developed from back then to what they are today, when they're mostly in technology. So the
Mhm.
old economies of yesterday are some of the new economy companies of today. There's several examples for it, like in Germany, as Siemens or Philips, in the Netherlands. These type of companies that were involved in sort of industrial manufacturing, and today they're involved in not only but in a lot of what we would call technology today. So that's sort of one emergence, and you're right. So technology is the biggest change that we've had,
Mhm.
and because of technology, we've then had so many other new industries that have evolved. Outside of the asset heavy industries, right? I would say the services as a big part has certainly evolved. Where at the beginning there was no business services team in investment banking when I started, just like there was no technology team. Right now, business services is a very important sector,
Correct.
and obviously technology is. And then within most other industry groups, you also have a tech part. Back then, when we did investment banking for what we called financial services investment banking, those were either banks or insurance companies, right? And obviously today, we've got fintech or insurtech and all of that. And real estate back then was just about asset heavy real estate, and
Correct.
today you can have technology related real estate software, whatever. So I think that's sort of the biggest change when it comes to what you've actually worked on.
Correct.
And then
And
obviously how you worked on it is
exactly, yeah.
obviously a gigantic difference. Again,
Because
because of technology. Yeah.
correct. Because I think these days when you have to do a deal, you communicate over the email, call, WhatsApp, right? Or get on a video call, and the deal happens very fast. I mean, obviously it takes 6, 7 months, a year, a lot of times. But back then we did not have this, right?
Mm.
So how much time would it take for a deal to close? And what was the process like? I mean, you had to
Yeah.
travel every single time to the
You
client's
know,
place.
Bhavesh, what the interesting thing about this, the truth is right now, I would say a deal takes the same time now that it took 30 years ago.
What are you
It's not
saying?
faster, unfortunately. On the contrary, right now, actually, or in the last year, and we can talk about that later if you want, I can tell you reasons why at the moment deals are taking longer.
Oh,
But it is funny that and interesting that, there are some things today which we can do at one click of the button, which when I started would have taken us 1 week to do without exaggeration. And now you press one button and it's done, but it's still not faster to do a deal overall, just because you don't have to call a company to get the annual report. You then type the numbers from the annual report by hand into Excel. Then you start putting in formulas in Excel and make adjustments and do all sorts of other stuff. And then maybe after a week, you have a valuation model ready, and which today is you can do the same within a day. That would have taken 7 days back then, but still a deal takes the same amount of time. Back then we had a fax machine, when we had phone calls, we had physical meetings, and we had a fax machine, and people would congregate around the fax machine when you were waiting for offers to come in for a company that you were selling. They would come in by fax, right?
it
So
was
you
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I still remember when email was introduced and not a lot of people were using it. So there you go. And when you wanted to sign a deal, you had to fly somewhere. It was all very ceremonial. You would sign with a pen, and unless you need a notary, like in Germany, you still need a notary today. But in other countries, you can use DocuSign to sign a deal at the end, and you don't need a big ceremony or anything. So
Correct.
these are some of the things of how it's changed. But what hasn't changed at the end of the day is that getting a deal done in M&A is a lot about culture, about relationships, about trust between human beings. And that hasn't changed really, which is why it still takes a long time to get a deal done sometimes.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, it eventually comes down to trust when you're actually trying to merge two companies or get somebody acquire or sell the business. True, true, true. So, how do you see? I mean, we have seen in the last 5, 6 years, especially after COVID has hit us, there has been a lot of turbulence, right? We had 3 years gone into COVID, then we started having this Russia-Ukraine war, and then we started having this US Euro Iran war going on, and there's a back-to-back occasions or situations coming up. So, and we every year when it starts off, we think that okay, this year is going to be something which will actually improve than the last 4 years, but it eventually goes flat, right? But this year we did expect, and it has somehow met the expectations. How do you see this year and the next year to be in the M&A industry, to the deal
Yeah,
making
I think
process?
you're right. I think eventually we as humans were very adaptable, and sort of eventually we get used to certain situations, even if they're
Yeah,
difficult, right? But yeah, of course, all the various wars in various regions have had an effect, and I think confidence and yeah, expectations are really important, and certainty is important, and times of uncertainty may make things difficult.
correct.
And yeah, I think this year we have seen, after I would say two sort of bumpy and more difficult years, we have seen some improvement in the market. I think I told you that my company, we specialized on tech-enabled services as a
Correct.
space, where we had a couple of I think challenging years, which you had in other industries too. This year it's been better. There's a few reasons for that. I mean, here in the UK, I mean, today the interest rates were kept at the same level, but generally we've seen a slight easing of the interest rates, which has helped in the space, and we've also seen some of the larger companies get back to a more sort of stable performance in terms of quarterly performance, quarterly growth. So slowly but surely coming back, which brings confidence back into, I would say, the whole M&A space. We're hopefully expecting that to continue and improve more towards the course of next year as well.
Right. And which sectors do you see these days, booming? Business services, healthcare, is energy? Energy has been the center stage of the entire
Energy's
growth.
been interesting. Obviously, the renewable energy sector, of course, a very interesting space.
For UK specifically?
Sorry?
For UK, in the UK specifically, you're talking about the entire European
No,
market?
not the UK specifically. I would say generally speaking. I think obviously technology is important, right? And we have seen, and I think we're going to get there, but obviously the emergence of AI has been I think a big talking point while people are trying to figure out what it actually means for everyone. I think this is probably is going to have the biggest effect of anything that we're going to see, or at least that we have seen this year.
Correct. And has AI, especially in the last 1 year, we have seen a huge shift in technology itself, especially with AI. And everybody's expecting that with AI, things will become faster, things will become more smoother. So have you seen that shift happening in the AI in the investment industry because of AI? Or you think
I
that will
think
happen in the future?
I think there's still, I mean, it's still early days for us, I would say. So we've seen a lot of investment go into it. We've seen a lot of buzz around it, of course. We have seen a lot of people worried about what it's going to replace, right? And what it means for, the job market, for example, or what it means for software companies. And I think the jury is still out. I don't think there's anybody alive today who can really give you a proper answer of what's going to happen there. But we'll certainly see, we're seeing already an incredible amount of change at an incredible speed as well in that space, and because of AI.
Wow, nice. And so, especially there's one thing is AI, and then the other thing is actually we are seeing a lot of people actually getting interested in the investment banking industry, right? So especially the new graduates who are passing out from after doing MBA. So there's a lot of people who want to get into investment banking industry. This was not the even 10 years back or 15 years back, the kind of surge we are seeing these days. So what is it one piece of advice that you would give somebody who is getting into this bank industry? Because it looks very glittery, right? It looks very fascinating, and how the deal making process happens, how you talk to people, how do you communicate, how do you build relationships, right? So it is very, very fascinating. So what is that advice that you would give to the newcomers?
I think it's interesting that you say it looks fascinating. I think that's good. I take that as a compliment. I would say it can be as fascinating as it can also be challenging or mundane sometimes. I would say in investment banking, the high, I always say the highs can be very high and the lows can be very low, because at the end of the day, it's all about getting a transaction done. And when you imagine if you work on something for a year, and at the end the transaction happens, it's an incredible feeling, because it's something that you'll always be part of, and you can Google it in 20 years and say, that's the deal, and I worked on this when I was young. But if it doesn't happen, you might have spent a year or a year and a half on it, and at the end if the deal doesn't close, it's almost like it never happened, right? You won't read about it anywhere. And sometimes for young people, that is something that isn't easy to manage, right? So you need to have, not a lot of people are very, very smart and clever coming out of uni, and they definitely have the skills for it in terms of the actual kind of skills that you need, number skills. But my advice would also be that the intangible skills are as important as well, in terms of, the mental side of it and the ability to not just look for, I would say, quick wins or quick satisfaction, but the longevity of it, and also the potential of how do you deal with disappointment and how do you deal with failure. Can you get up again and go the next day after you spend a year and a half on a deal that didn't happen? So these are some of the questions you can ask yourself
It does
when you're
happen
young.
that way, is it?
But honestly, Bhavesh, young people these days, they have a lot more choice than we had back then. They have a lot more information, right? You could probably ask, Claude or whoever to give you all the detail of the investment banking job before you even started, right? So that you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So young people of today, they've got the advantage that they can do a lot of research around it, and certainly because I just mentioned AI, that the job of a young investment banker is probably also changing. I can see that it's going to be harder for younger people to differentiate themselves, because if everybody has access to AI, everybody can then write a great meeting summary, or everybody can then do a financial model with the help of AI, and write an information memorandum. Maybe maybe in a year or two, information memorandums of companies that are being sold will not be written by humans anymore, but by AI. So I also find it interesting to see how the job of the young person in M&A will actually evolve in the future. I don't know the answer yet. I don't know how much, but we're getting bombarded every day from AI companies that want to come and replace what our young people are doing with AI. And sure, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I can imagine that the really large investment banks that have got the money to really plow into this, they probably are very actively looking at this and working on this. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm actually very, very excited, especially for the next 3 to 4 years, when this AI basically takes the center stage in your workspace, and eventually every single thing starts happening because of that. And you just, I don't know if our creativity will go away or not.
Yeah.
But let's see. Let's see how that goes.
Okay.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Rami. Yeah, it was amazing talking to you. I think it was a
Thank
very
you, Bhavesh.
insightful session.
Thank you.